let's kick off our new segment here. Keyboard Warriors, brought to you by our good friends, Barrel Theory Beer Company. You can check them out, obviously, down the road on East 7th, basically walking equidistant to them as you would to, say, a Tom Reed's or a Bad Weather on the other side of town. Great for pregame or postgame. And once you get to the rink, you can check them out on the main level, sections 105, 106 for their Crowler of the day. It's my first stop whenever I go to a game. You can also get their Raindrops IPA on tap right around section 112 there at the burger stands. And they have various locations throughout the club and 200 levels. I'm most of the way done with my early access here, a delicious hazy IPA. And actually, it's a little bit covered up by their standard label branding, but basically got the Nike swoosh going on here. Just beautiful craftsmanship. And I know, Joe, we're almost through Lent. I'm really sorry for rubbing this delicious IPA in your face. But again, Keyboard Warriors here. This is our new weekly hot take segment, which really we're counting on all of you to give us submissions. Whether you have hot takes yourself, if you see someone make an interesting post on Twitter and you want to tag it in the comments below each post, great, we'll take it. This week we actually had some good submissions, Joe, and I know we're not going to run through all of them. Some of them are good enough that they're going to be banked for next week, but let's hit one. I think at least hit one that's completely off the hockey sphere, one that maybe is more Minnesota or Gopher focused, maybe one of each. Yeah. So shout out to everyone that commented, especially Better Dead Than Red. It's a shot at Wisconsin. We love it, Jeremy. And Sean Cosgrove, both of them were going crazy in the comments. We'll lead here with Drew Cove, who Gopher insider himself. He's got a double for us. One of them that stays with the Wild and one of them that goes more the film and nerd-itch direction. First one, Minnesota Wild's biggest rival is Winnipeg and is not Chicago. Rivalries need to be reciprocated by fan bases and achieve back and forth results. Chicago has dominated Minnesota in big time moments. We'll lead with that first. What are your thoughts, Joe?
I mean, historically, yeah, they had a lot more, battles in the early rounds of the playoffs back when the Blackhawks were in their quote pre-dynasty era there. So if we're going like right now, like which this team has the most like animosity, I think, from the Wild. I know Winnipeg has fed that too with the way that they played in games, like Perfetti Hartman thing. Like every game they play in Winnipeg, it seems like Kirill gets injured. So Winnipeg is right up there. Don't discount the Blues though. Like I just think that the Blues have the playoff, a little bit of history with the Wild, and also just seems like every game there's some fight, there's some bad scrum, there's something going on. I'd have to be like the division teams like that would be up there for me. Chicago, like now they're in the rebuild, like none of those guys that were the rivals for them like before are really with the lineup anymore. So I think just geography in the division, it's going to naturally get there again. But I think right now it's probably Winnipeg or St. Louis, because they'd be Dallas, but Dallas obviously has their number, and so hasn't really been kind of reciprocated rivalry. There.
Yeah, I think the level of physicality with the Winnipeg matchups has always been there. And I'm with Drew that, like, sure, Chicago's kind of been a rival, but it's never really been competitive when the teams are both going for, whether it's in the playoffs or working towards the playoffs, and strong seasons for both teams. Like, they've had our number, and they had a really good team for a stretch there. So obviously that's going to happen, but it's going to be interesting with them on the rise now, bringing in guys like Bedard, who knows, maybe Celebrini, Oliver Moore, Frank Nazar. Like, they are on the rise, and it's going to be interesting to see that collide with Bill Guerin getting $15 million magically that he can start spending. So maybe that'll be a renewed rivalry. We'll see. Second piece for Drew Cove. The Phantom Menace is actually a great film.
Hmm.
That is one of my favorite chirps with Star Wars fans. On top of, I always will say Star Trek instead of Star Wars, just to get the nerd reaction. Like, people will get triggered very easily by calling it the wrong thing. And I'll bring up Phantom Menace being incredible because it's their least favorite. They all hate Jar Jar Binks. And I personally actually do like it because I think Darth Maul is just the coolest character that Star Wars has ever produced.
Yeah, I'll let you handle that one. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, so I would not want to get myself on the wrong end of big fans who are like, ready to take me out for not giving the right critique on that one. But I have seen all the movies. It's just been such a long time. Wouldn't want to give a Siskel and Ebert reaction to that one. The Game of Thrones question was better, but yeah.
Okay, I mean, we can hit that. And this coming from Isha, Game of Thrones is worse than Walking Dead, and both are horrendous. At least Walking Dead had tremendous books. Game of Thrones books were almost as garbage as the disgrace of a fantasy story that was Game of Thrones.
I mean, Game of Thrones is one of my favorite shows I've ever seen. So
yeah, I fight East on this all the time. He's an idiot.
Like, yeah, I mean, it may not be for you or may not be for each individual person, like the way it's presented, but I thought it was, my wife and I were glued to our TV every time it came out again. So I'd be a voiceful disagreement in that one.
Well, we got House of the Dragon coming this summer. And to be honest, the first season of that, I didn't even particularly enjoy. I'm still hooked and I'm going to watch and see where it develops. Game of Thrones, if you want to bash the final season, I'll stand out of your way. Like, they wrapped it up horribly. They tried to go through it as quickly as possible in a callback here to Drew Cove because they wanted to get out and go do the next Star Wars trilogy. And oh, weird, they ended up getting the boot because of how awful that conclusion to Game of Thrones was. But the rest of the way, I thought it was incredible. And it's funny too, because like Lord of the Rings, sure, like I can see people like leaning in and saying that that's a nerd itch. Game of Thrones was basically the merging of worlds between nerds and non-nerds all loving the same show. Like, I don't think that Game of Thrones, the series, is nerdy at all. Reading the books, sure, you can label it that, but I just, like, there was no one besides Isha that pointed at Game of Thrones and said, this is bad.
Yeah, that one was, I mean, Isha, feel bad if you didn't like it, but I'd still rewatch that series. I'd still, at some point, give it some time, but maybe sad with the ending. But everything else was great about it.
Yeah. Now, Jeremy, we're actually going to hit on your Gopher comment next week because I actually think it's a really interesting one to talk about, but it'll align better with the interview we're hopefully banking this week with the Middlestat brothers. That's right, the two that are still at the University of Minnesota. But one that we'll throw in here as well. This one is very topical for Minnesota Wild Twitter in general, coming from Mateo. The NMCs handed out before the year don't actually matter that much. They are all solid players making fair or even bargain AAV. And if they were traded, you would be going back out into free agency for similar players. That is very controversial among the general fan base on Twitter. What say you?
Was that Bill Guerin's ghost account? Yeah,
one of Guerin's like 12 burners.
It sounds exactly like kind of what he said before. Like, he signed them because A, they're good players. B, if you get rid of Marcus Foligno, you have to go out and try to replace him. Which in some instances is accurate. I think there's still value to Marcus Foligno. I just didn't see the rush to sign him to 4x4 in September. Like, that's all. Like, I mean, I think you could make an argument to re-sign him like this summer, like, or this end of the year. Like, I think he's a valuable player. He's a valuable leader on a team that doesn't have a lot of vocal voices. Like, you worry about his longevity, like as far as his injuries, because he plays that hard game. And I thought, going into the year, like you look at the last couple of years, Zuccarello is an awful contract, for a couple more years. And you thought aligning him with Kaprizov, A, they play well together historically. B, keep your superstar happy, and you still need to, not like there's like a plethora of options of guys that they've been throwing up in the top six there alongside Kaprizov. So You know, I mean, and for me, like I'll continue to say this until I'm blue in the face. It wasn't the who, it was the when. It wasn't the who they signed, it was the when they signed them, and the options that they took away from themselves at the deadline. When you saw players,
Yes.
maybe even lesser players, getting very good draft capital at the deadline for it. But you know, but they're right in the sense that like there's a prospects ready to step in to play Ryan Hartman's role or ready to play, you know, Zuccarello's role. They don't, you know, this team doesn't have a lot of secondary scoring as it is, right? So, and I don't know who'd be available in free agency to replace them if they wanted to, but
Sure.
The Wild are not. I would repeat, they are not in a rebuild. They never have been in a rebuild. So, and that's Guerin's point too. They're in a rebuild.
In their existence, they've never been in a rebuild.
Never said the word rebuild. So, all those factors play in. Again, and I don't think these are bad players. I don't think, you know, I think that maybe it's a year or too long for Foligno as far as his contract, but it's more so just the when, why be in such a hurry, let the year play out and see how it goes. But, you know, this is where they are, and this is the core that he believes in. And if they reward him, it'd be a heck of a story, right? You know, Bill Guerin sticking to his guns and like, hey, regardless of what everybody else says and rips me, like these are the guys I believe in, and they eventually took us to where we wanted to be. So that would be a story that writes itself.
Yeah, and for me, it's partially like you said, the timing is huge. Like I don't know why we were in a rush, especially with all three. I think most fans, if they had signed one or two of those deals, pick out of the hat. I don't care which one or two. People probably aren't reacting the same way. But like you said, you're strapped to the deadline. You really don't have any chips to move in a year where you probably would have liked to, regardless of what they'll say publicly about chasing the playoffs right now. They would have loved to get some assets for something, right? And for Foligno, like you said, maybe a year or two too long, maybe a little bit more on the AAV than they'd like if you want to go 4 years. But the no movement clauses for all three guys, it's done a lot to trigger fans and think, oh gosh, is this going to be the country club again? Like get these older players that like playing in Minnesota and basically lock them in so they're not leaving unless they want to. I gotta wonder though, especially, I mean, even if you remove the injury, but we won't, there's no way that if Bill Guerin is extending Marcus Foligno today, he's giving him a 4x4.
Yeah. Well, I just don't know. I mean, is he getting that in open market, right? Is he getting that? I don't know if he is. This year has been obviously tough for him with his injuries and stuff like that. And then the production hasn't been there. If it's like a 15, 20 goal scorer and your guy plays at that size and level, then hey, like those guys are hard to find, right? Again, like this will be a topic that'll be talked about for forever, it seems like. But like the hot take said, it's not like the worst thing in the world, but it's not. There's some issues with the timing of it that led to some inflexibility at the deadline, and now you're kind of going to be with the same group for several years now because no one's going anywhere.
Yep, that is a fact. All right, we've got a couple from Cosgrove and Jeremy that we will be carrying over to next week. But again, thank you all for chiming in. We're going to keep this rolling in the future, and once there become even more comments, we're definitely going to have to be more selective on which ones we talk through. But I don't know, good first swing here for Barrel Theory's Keyboard Warrior segment.
Yeah, so far so good, and maybe we'll try to do some quick hit ones so we kind of can keep it moving along. There's a lot of interesting topics. We'll get to a couple of them, and maybe not. I won't talk so long about it. So
no, it's okay. Talk away.